Welcome to CSN's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Week 4 webinar. All of our webinars can be found at fightcybercrime.org. The previous webinars include Building a Foundation of Security, Spotting the Scammer, and Top Scams Facing Consumers in 2022. Today's webinar will be Best Practices for Very Small Businesses, and we are very pleased to have Tiffany Ricks, the founder and CEO of HacWare, with us today to discuss best practices for small businesses. Tiffany, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your company?
Absolutely, Bob. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the Cybercrime Support Network for having me. This is a great discussion. And a little bit about myself. I am the founder and CEO of HacWare. And what we do at HacWare is we focus on security education with our platform. It's an AI-driven platform. But prior to HacWare, I've been in cybersecurity for over 15 years. I've worked with the United States Department of Defense, working with their security engineering teams. I worked as an ethical hacker, but I also understand many of the people who are on this call where I've been that solopreneur, that micro enterprise. And so I'm really happy today to share, what's going on, how you can protect yourself while you're trying to build, you're trying to grow and scale.
Right. Thank you. Well, we've had discussions before, we've talked before, and as you know, if you're a small business or a solopreneur, you've got to wear many hats. You got to take care of human resources, marketing, finance, accounting. Small business owner is a very busy person dealing with a lot of different issues. But today what we're hoping to do is give that small business owner some pieces of information, some tips they can take away to help them address cybersecurity effectively, but without putting a strain on either their monetary budget or their time budget. And so today what we're hoping to cover are really 4 items: setting up your tech stack, your tech stack with security in mind, protecting your customers' data, protecting your business's data. And then what we say is do what you do best and outsource the rest. So Tiffany, let's get right into it. Can you talk about how the small business owner should think about setting up their tech stack, and what does it mean, and what should business owners be thinking about before they begin integrating these various systems? Thanks.
Absolutely, Bob. It's super important for solo entrepreneurs to think about cybersecurity because we're not really taught that. We're looking up articles on how to build a e-commerce business or how to build a company that you've always dreamed about building. But a lot of these articles and resources miss cybersecurity and how do you protect your business from when an attack happens. And so it's really important for businesses to think about their stack. And this is really a way, it's basically building tools and practices. I like to say practices to make sure that you are protecting your organization from when a cybercrime happens. And there's 7 things that a business should include in their stack to make sure that they are protecting themselves. And these 7 things will protect their organization from about 85% of the threats that are happening out here. And I like to say you can do it on a shoestring budget. And so the first thing you should really consider in your stack is it's easy. You have to first think about, well, what's important to us? What's important to my organization? Is it that I want to keep my data safe? Because if that is exposed, it's going to cause my organization to lose that data. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Is it the resources, the money that I've put into this organization? Do I want to keep that safe? Or is it our reputation, which could go a long way to help you get resources as far as money and customers, is your reputation. So you have to think about what are some of those things where if a cyber criminal gets into our organization, that can cause these important things to happen. And so the first thing is you want to make sure that you're following a plan, a framework. And I like to say when you're following these frameworks, which is CIS or NIST. You can look them up, but they have typically about for CIS, they have about 20 controls, 18 to 20 controls that you should do in your business. But when you're on a shoestring budget, I recommend that you tackle these 7 things. And so the first thing is you want to make sure that you have a virus scanning software on your hardware. And I like to say, look for a malware scanning solution to scan your hardware continuously. You can put it on your computer devices and your mobile device. So get that. The second thing that you should have is you should understand all of the software products that you have, SaaS solutions, all of these software products that you have that's giving you automation, that's giving you, the ability to do more with less. You need to understand, well, what's connected to them, who, if there's a third party, who in my organization has access to them. And then you want to make sure that you limit the access or remove access when you're no longer doing business with these parties. And then the third thing is you just want to make sure if you have the ability to if you have a virtual private network, make sure that you can segment your environment from a private or a public network. And then password managers, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but you want to make sure that you have a password manager. And there's ways that you could set it up where your master password, you could be leaving yourself open if you're not using a strong master password where you're just giving the cyber criminal access to all of your apps because you've used a weak password. And then what we do is we help you and the people that are within your organization, whether they are part of the organization or a third party, security training to address phishing, which is the number one issue that are plaguing solo entrepreneurs around the world is phishing. And so the way that you stop these phishing attacks is you have to train yourself and your people on how to actually avoid these attacks. And they could be internal or third parties, but they all, if they have access to any part of your organization, they need security awareness training. And then you want to also make sure in case a breach does happen, that you have this data backed up and you're backing it up continuously and you're testing those backups, because if a ransomware attack happens, you want to make sure that you don't have to pay that ransom because you have a backup that is clear and clean from any malicious software that you can restore and come back whole again. And then the last and final thing is I want you all to consider when a breach happens and you've done all of these things to prevent it, but somehow things haven't worked in your favor and something has happened where a cyber criminal has gotten in. Now let's use cybersecurity insurance. And so looking at getting, a tech E&O plan that's going to help you, either pay off that ransom or get back whole again. And so those are the 7 things. They're easy. It may sound like it's a lot, and a lot of them don't cost zero to, a little bit of money. But these 7 things will help you combat 85% of the cyber attacks that are happening. And they can happen continuously and automated, where it's almost a set it and forget it type of approach.
Tiffany, thank you. You covered a lot of things that I was hoping that you were going to cover. One question for those of us in the audience who don't understand, what is tech E&O? What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, so it is a type of insurance that handles errors and omissions. And so there's 2 types of plans. You can get cybersecurity insurance, cybersecurity liability. And so that will cover some of the cybersecurity incidents, but you can also, if your insurance provider doesn't have something that specifically says cybersecurity liability, you can get a technical E&O, errors and omissions, included into your general liability plan. And that typically has sub-limits and clauses on how they can help you through ransomware attacks. And you also want to look and see, do they handle phishing attacks like business email compromise scams and other social engineering attacks.
So it's just, you want to get, when you're shopping for cyber insurance, you want to get E&O coverage, errors and omissions,
Yeah.
and you also want to get liability coverage.
Yes, you want to make sure that you have a plan. You can get them separate, or there's some that it is included all into one. So it's up to you. You have to talk to your insurance provider to really understand. The key thing you want to ask is, do they cover social engineering attacks?
Okay.
And what is the limit of, if there is a social engineering attack, like a business email compromise scam, like what is that limit that they would cover? And so that's the number one question you want to ask these insurance providers.
That is great information, because I think that a lot of business owners just don't have the background to understand if they need cyber insurance and what questions to ask when they go look for a cyber insurance policy. Thank you. That's very helpful. You covered all the things that I wanted to cover. I'm going to repeat them, not because just for emphasis for our audience, but you've really already covered these things, like the importance of encrypting your customer data. And looking at the data you collect. Some people collect too much, right? Do you really need that data? If you don't need it, don't collect it. Less liability there, less danger. Passwords is one of my favorite topics, right? I mean, so many people, and if you have people working for you, you're as secure as your weakest employee's password. And so, in initiating rules about that, we encourage the use of two-factor authentication. I'm sure you would support that as well, and encourage that. You talked about it in better language than I'm going to right now, the principle of least privilege, which you addressed directly and defined. Thank you. Which is, look, if an employee doesn't need access to this information, then don't grant them access to that. It just protects you and it protects your information. And not that employee is a bad person, but if that employee gets hacked, it's just another vulnerability for you, right? And then you also hit on the phishing training. I mean, phishing is huge. It's really kind of cyber social engineering in a way, and it's really, in my opinion, how most things get compromised. So I was looking at the Verizon data breach report for this year, and some of the things they had is the top patterns they saw: system intrusion, social engineering, and privilege misuse represented 98% of the breaches that were reported to them. 69% were external threat actors, 34% internal, and there's a mixture of multiple, and then there's multiple incidents as well, at a much smaller number. The motivation was, according to the reports that came into the Verizon data breach report, they were 100% financial. And the things that got compromised, credentials, 93%. And the top exploit, you want to guess? Ransomware. So, I think, that, like you said, that is a big, big, big piece of it. So when it comes to protecting customer data, like, what would you have us keep in mind?
Great points, Bob. I mean, you're totally right. Ransomware is one of the top, exploits. And, back to what we were talking about, insurance, like insurance claims, their top two claims that they are paying out for is ransomware and malware types of attacks. And so what we have to do is, when these attacks happen, this data is going to the dark web. So they are taking our customer data and putting it on the dark web. And two things are going to happen. Another cyber criminal is going to find that data about these customers, which oftentimes has email addresses, it has their login credentials. And if your customers don't have the education to know that they shouldn't use the same password across different systems, now the cyber criminals are able to take those credentials and try all of these different sites because they know that there's a high probability that these credentials are going to work somewhere. And so now with this breach that happened on your site, on your watch, now you are exposing these customers to a bigger loss. And so this is why they target small businesses. This is why they target solo entrepreneurs and very small micro organizations, is because they know that you all aren't doing those 7 things to make it hard for them. And they know all they have to do is target these organizations, and all they really oftentimes they want, they have a couple motivations. They want those credentials to be able to go to the top banking sites and log in and get and get access to that data. The other thing is maybe they just want to take your organization down. And it could be, we've seen this with a lot of nonprofits where they do not agree with what this organization stands for. And so they want to take that organization down, take them offline. And they're doing this also with businesses where they want to take you offline. And so this means you're going to actually have days where you could be generating revenue. You could be, people who you employ can't work. And so I'm painting the picture of why you should care about these things. And so now, how do we actually protect our customer data? So there's a couple ways you want to do this. You want to be careful what you're actually collecting. So you want to be careful collecting what's called personal identifiable information. If you don't need PII, if you don't need to store and collect that, then, and a good example of that is an example of PII is an email address. And so if you really don't need that information about your customers, don't collect it, because you're susceptible. It depends on your industry. You may be susceptible to regulations that require you to store it in a certain way. And if there's a cybersecurity incident, then you could have some negative ramifications to your organization. And then your geographic region. So over 25 states have laws that require businesses, if they have access to PII, personal identifiable information, then they're violating laws, data privacy laws. And so to keep that information secure, if you have to have it, then you want to make sure that you follow certain things to encrypt it. So a good rule of thumb is, if you're storing that information and you may be storing it into some system or database, you want to encrypt that data. If you're using communication tools like email, then you want to communicate over secure email. Microsoft Outlook has a way where you can communicate over secure communication. And you also want to look at, the opportunity where you can, again, limit access to PII. So if you have to store it, and Bob brought up a good point, least privilege access. And so if there's someone in your team doesn't need access to that PII, then you need to have certain safeguards in place where they can't get to it. Because again, if a breach happens and you're in this heavily regulated industry, or in a state where they have these data privacy laws, then each record, each piece of information, and data wise, you can have an email account that's breached, and every piece of content that's in that data could cost at least $150 to $250. And so when you add all of that stuff up of what a breach could actually cost in the monitoring, the customer data identity monitoring tools that you have to purchase for these customers who are a part of a breach, that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for a small business. And so that's why we see 60% of them go out of business after a cybersecurity incident. 60% go out of business because they can't afford, to handle that type of price tag. And so it's super important. And I'll tell you this story. we worked with so it was an e-commerce company, but it was a company who focused on, they were a therapy. They were a platform that gave people the ability to get therapy and get matched up with a therapist.
Hmm.
And they were a small one-person organization, but they built a platform that supported many therapists in their patients. Cyber criminals targeted that organization by using a phishing scam, took over their email, and then sent emails from that
Right.
organization to all of the therapists, all of the patients, with a malicious link in it, where they were able to
Mm.
take over their accounts and breach their data. And so if something, so cyber criminals want what small businesses have, and it's because it's easy. It's an easy target for them to gain access.
Right. That was kind of the next thing I was going to ask you about is like, oftentimes small business owners think, oh, they just want to go after Microsoft and Google and Ford and General Motors and big, large companies. They don't care about my landscaping business, right? But you've just shown that's not really true.
That's totally right. I mean, so my background is in what's called ethical hacking, and it's to show companies, no matter their size, how a cyber criminal can get in and what they can take. And I saw firsthand working with small businesses. I showed them firsthand how a cyber criminal can get in, and it's easy just using now that we're all online, we have, emails, and we can create fake LinkedIn profiles. There's so many opportunities for a cyber criminal to impersonate and trick vulnerable business owners and employees through phishing attacks. And it is because it's just super easy. They have so many tools, and it doesn't require them to put a lot of effort into trying to break into like a Microsoft.
Right, which is a question I wanted to ask you. I mean, this is really interesting to me that, your background as an ethical hacker,
Mhm.
if I understand, you would, basically market your services to companies and say, I will find your weaknesses. I mean, we won't do anything bad with what we find if we hack your company, but we'll let you know like how we were able to do it so you can tighten that up, right? So, my question to you is from that's very interesting to me. So from your experience doing that, percentage wise, just ballpark, like how much of that was like ones and zeros, hacker in the basement with a hood over on, with wearing a hoodie, just figuring out to get into the software versus how much was it social engineering?
Oh, I can tell you 80% of the attacks are social engineering. And that was my experience as well. 80% of the endeavors of trying to figure out how to get in, we started with what was easy. And what was
Mhm.
easy was, let's see if we can start with a phishing email. And the first step was a generic one where we didn't put that much time. I didn't put that much time into it. Just wanted to see who was going to bite and who was going to click on the link. Then from there, it was, now no one's responding. That didn't work. Let me look and see if there's anything about the company online. Have they announced anything? Has there been a bunch of movement in the organization where maybe, they announced that they have this new customer that they're really excited about, or they announced this new employee. And so that could be a way that you can do a spear phishing type of attack. And then from there, if phishing didn't work, but 80% of the time it did, then it is okay. Now, is there something in their website that I could try to, is there a form in the website that I could try to break into? Is there, something wrong with their application that I can try to pull data out? And so that is typically what an ethical hacker is doing, is they are trying to look at social engineering attacks, but across the different layers. As I mentioned before, you have to have all these different layers to protect yourself. And they're trying to show the organization these are your gaps. And then they're giving a recommendation on this is how you need to close these gaps before a real cyber criminal gets in.
So, it sounds like what you're saying is, in very simple terms, your biggest vulnerability is human beings.
About 90% of the vulnerability starts with people. And it's because it's not that they're bad, it's a lack of education.
That's exactly right.
They have a lack of education and they're vulnerable. And so it is our part as business owners where we have to make sure that we are preparing ourselves, preparing our team. And you have to always, when you're trying to prepare them, when you're thinking about training them on cybersecurity, you have to make it easy, but you also have to make it personalized, because this is information. When you talk about the attacks that are happening to you personally and how it could affect their students or their parents, and give them tools and information that they can take home to make sure that they're protecting themselves personally, then that's when it goes a long way and you start building up, that organization that really is trying to figure out how do we learn and how do we also, get our job done.
That's great information. We covered this a little bit earlier, but this week we posted a blog on our website, and it was titled "Do What You Do Best and Outsource the Rest." So as you said, small business owners have so many things. They're trying to grow their business. They're doing HR. They're doing payroll. Advertising. Everything they have to do everything. They wear a lot of different hats. They're very, very busy. Most of the small business owners that I know are busy. As my wife used to say, they work half days from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and usually more of them, and they work more than that usually. So they're very, very busy folks. But that's why we say do what you do best, outsource the rest. So you've already offered some guidance, and you did a great job of explaining cyber insurance. But are there any other things that you could offer a small business owner, 1-2 person shop, about how they can be a very good cybersecurity shopper, like what they should be looking for? Any gotchas, any advice you could provide would be helpful.
So there's two. So if there's two. You want to look for, when you're looking for products. So before, I'm going to mention hiring a professional, but a lot of times when we're in that early stage, we may not have the budget to outsource to a third party. And so you want to look for tools that work for you. So you want to look for, as I mentioned, those 7 basic things. You want to look for malware software that's automatically updating and pulling in those updates in that software to scan your devices. And you want to put it on your PC devices, your Mac devices, and your mobile devices. You want to make sure that you have on all of your SaaS solutions and software solutions set up multi-factor authentication. That's something simple and easy, where you just have to take that additional step to say, I'm going to log in with these credentials, but then I also want to make sure that there's a mobile SMS number set up where it's going to verify that I am who I say I am. And so set up multi-factor authentication on all of your applications. It's super simple and easy. And then you also want to onboard and add a password manager. It doesn't cost that much, and a lot of them are free. Yep. And so now let's talk about, if you have a third party, you want a third party, an expert to actually manage this, because we are busy. We're trying to grow our business. We understand our subject matter expertise, and we don't want to spend the time, setting those things up. So let's get an expert in. And so I would recommend finding a managed service provider. So this is a person who is going to manage your IT, but also your information security, your cybersecurity. They're going to manage all of that for you. And typically they have bundles where they'll say, okay, for package one is going to be this monthly cost or this annual cost. And they make it affordable to small businesses because that's their customer oftentimes. So how do you find a good managed service provider? For short, they go by MSP. There's a couple ways. So if you're already at your local chamber of commerce because you're networking, you're trying to grow your business,
Right.
oftentimes you're going to see a managed service provider there, at least one there. And that's a way that you can build a relationship with this professional, ask them those questions. A lot of time they're in that advisory role where they want to be that mentor and help you through your cybersecurity journey, and you can hire them, there. That's where you can find them.
Yeah.
But the other place you can find them is online. And so a lot of managed service providers are giving you the ability to find them, just like you would find, you would find a product on Amazon. And so you want to do your research, you want to see customer reviews, you can see the reviews about them and their business from their customers on Google. And you want to make sure that you find that managed service provider. When you look at what the services that they provide cybersecurity services. You want to make sure that they have security awareness training, and that they provide, the database recovery and storage for you, and many of those other things we talked about. And if they don't, then that's not the managed service provider, the MSP for you. You want to make sure that you have a professional that handles your IT and your security, and review those reviews, because customers, they're going to make a review
Right.
when someone's doing well. And there are some bad ones out there. And so you want to make
That's
sure
right.
you pay attention to those bad reviews as well.
All right. Excellent. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today. I just kind of want to summarize some of the things that we've said to kind of come up with a few key points. I've taken a few notes about what you said. I hope you don't mind. But just, in reviewing, I'm sure I didn't capture everything, but just in a nutshell, here's kind of my takeaways, and you can add on to that or subtract in a second. But virus and malware protection, that's essential. You'd suggest that. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. And then you caveat it and give very important, like on all devices, right? If your employees are accessing your information on their cell phone, is that protection on their cell phone? They're going to go for the weakest link, right? You're only as secure as your least secure employee. So that was a great suggestion. Understanding your software, I thought that was fantastic, because it encapsulates knowing the data that you have, knowing where it's connected, knowing if it's encrypted. I thought that was a great comment. We've talked about it under I gave the kind of cybersecurity answer about principle of least privilege, but you've kind of explained it and just said, hey, limit your access. If the person is just there to sweep up the floor, they don't need access to your financial information, for example, right? So limit their access to what your employee needs, because you never know. I mean, they may not have any bad intentions at all. They may have just made a mistake. And if they have access and they're compromised, now that is compromised. And so you explained that very, very, very well for us. You talked briefly about VPN and segmenting your data. I know we didn't discuss it a lot, but I think that's a wonderful idea as well. And of course, multi-factor authentication, that is a big thing that we emphasize here at Cybercrime Support Network. We feel like probably 80 to 90% of things could be eliminated if people just did that. And not 100, but the vast majority. And then you touched on phishing and how important phishing is, and what a vulnerability it is, and how important it is to train your employees and recognize it yourself. We completely agree. And you talked about having a plan. And you gave us some very good advice about how to be a good cybersecurity shopper with insurance, and how to pick a provider. So any important, thank you for all that great information. Is there any important things that I kind of left out in that summary that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the whole idea here is, it's all about making sure you protect your organization. You work so hard to build something from nothing, and your team members, like they have a choice to go and work with many organizations, but they chose to work with you all. And so it's really important, as you think about building your organization, to make sure that you're protecting it from cybercrime. And as we talk, there's super simple things that we can do to eliminate 80% of these threats. And so it's all about just getting started, and it's easy. And yeah, I'm really super excited to be here. We're a security training platform. We work with a lot of managed service providers, and so we're here to provide help in how we can help you educate and protect yourself from these phishing attacks. So reach out to us at HacWare.com, and we'll be happy to continue this conversation. And follow us on LinkedIn. You can see more about what we're doing and how we're trying to help businesses everywhere protect themselves from cyber criminals.
Tiffany, thank you very much. This has really been a great discussion. I've enjoyed talking with you today. I really enjoyed learning the ethical hacking stuff is fascinating to me. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about that and get your perspective on that. You've provided our listeners some really great information, and so we really, really appreciate that. I encourage everyone listening to check out Tiffany's company, HacWare, at HacWare.com. And, please also take a look at CSN's website, fightcybercrime.org, for more information on how to recognize, report, and recover from a cybercrime incident. And check out our other Cybersecurity Awareness Month webinars as well. You can find them at that same address, fightcybercrime.org. So thanks again, Tiffany. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob.
And thank you for watching. Stay safe.